The first Galactico era, an era I would personally love to forget about, to be honest with you. That was a real failure. I know there's that Zidane goal in 2002 Champions League final that makes a lot of Madrid fans to forget about the failures of the Galactico era, but it wasn't really a very good era. It still holds the longest trophyless season that Madrid has ever had, which is 3 seasons straight trophyless, which has never happened before. And it was the Galactico era. So I'm not really a fan of it, and I've never been a fan of the Galactico something. If you want to sign Galactico, sign young Galacticos. Don't sign guys that are almost over the hill or over 25, 26, 27. I'm not interested in that. If you want to sign Galacticos, the way Perez did in 2009 when he signed Ronaldo at the age of 22, 23, signed Benzema at the age of 21 or 20 years old, that is how you should do it. Look at the other signings that they made. The Kaká and the Alonso, who were over 27, 20 years. How did that go? You made that judgment by yourself, and you will see the reason why signing young Galacticos is the way forward. Let's see what this video has to say about this. But I have my own opinion about the Galactico era. I think it was an absolute failure on the field. Off the field, in terms of the marketing and everything, I guess it was fine if you want to look at it that way. But on the field, it was a failure. Let's get right into it.
The history of football. There has never been a club more prestigious and overall successful than the mighty Real Madrid. Throughout every era, Real Madrid have remained as giants and a club that demands respect from even the most fierce of opponents. However, in the early 2000s, the club was going through some major decline. So to fix their problems, Real Madrid built what is, relatively speaking, the most star-studded football squad of all time, spending what would be equivalent to over €1 billion on their starting 11 alone, who would iconically become known as the Galacticos. But as expensive and high profile as they were, looking back on that era nearly 2 decades later, it was simply put a huge failure. So just how and why is the most high profile squad of footballers ever assembled considered to be such a massive disappointment? Well, let's take a look. In the late 90s, Real Madrid were at the top of the footballing world. The club had won 2 Champions League trophies in just 3 seasons. However, that was about it. Despite the success, that was their only piece of silverware, and the club was struggling financially. They were €278 million in debt and struggled to fill the Santiago Bernabeu matches consistently, despite the discounts and other season ticket initiatives.
Thinking about that right now, like a lot of new Madrid fans wouldn't even believe that. Like they can't imagine the Bernabeu not being filled up. That is crazy.
One of the richest men in Spain decided to run for club president and to make huge changes to Real Madrid. Perez wanted to transform Real Madrid not only to a club that finds success on the pitch, but to a club that could also turn a huge profit. And so Perez would go on to try to find a solution to generate more interest and sales for the club. And his solution, well, simply put, he promised to get the biggest names in world of football and have them play for Real Madrid. He would almost completely change the structure of the club and would spend whatever amount was necessary to build a winning team. Real Madrid already had players like Roberto Carlos, Raul, Clarence Seedorf, Guti, and even a young Iker Casillas, which was already a very pricey squad. But Florentino Perez would break the bank and spend even more to build what would later be known as the Galacticos. And the first addition he added to the team was one of the most popular players in the world at the time, Barcelona's Luis Figo. And with the €60 million signing fee, or what is today nearly €95 million, the Galacticos era was off to a good start, with the addition of Luis Figo and Claude Makelele on the squad to bolster their overall midfield strength. Real Madrid would go on to win their first La Liga title in nearly half a decade. This one season alone, although they only won a league title, gave Perez the confidence to continue on with his Galacticos initiative. After all, with their generous budgets and strong additions to the squad, Real Madrid were looking more consistent than they did the previous seasons. And well, that's because having a bigger budget and a better team really does help. Luis Figo would win the 2000 Ballon d'Or, and Raul was La Liga's top goalscorer. Not only that, they had legendary Spanish manager and former Real Madrid player Vicente Del Bosque as the manager, who was letting players like Guti blossom into their best ever offensive form. But Florentino Perez was only getting started. Although the foundations for club success were already well in place, he needed to add more stars into the squad. So in the summer of 2001, Real Madrid would acquire Zinedine Zidane from Juventus for, which was back then, the highest ever transfer fee in the world of 72 million euros, which adjusted for today's inflation would be over 110 million euros. And Zidane was easily worth the record price tag, as the former World Cup champion, Ballon d'Or winner, and to even finish second place in last season's Ballon d'Or to Figo, was one of, if not the biggest name in world football at the time, achieving what Florentino Perez wanted: commercial sales and success on the pitch. In that specific order, Madrid squad had a
You see what he did there? You see what he did there in that specific order? Commercial success and success on the pitch. That means commercial success first. So this is why I stand with this. I think without the Galactico era, I don't know where Madrid will be right now. I think it would have been. I really do. I'm not really sure where the club would be right now. I can't really say, but I'm not sure we'll be where we are right now. I'm not sure about that. So the Galactico era was necessary at that point because signing those stars drew a lot of fans to Madrid and drew a lot of attention to Madrid, drew the merchandise and everything. So everything was going on in terms of commercially. So on paper, it was a very, very good move. But on the field, it wasn't. It just wasn't. I'm sorry, it wasn't.
Iker Casillas, who was just starting to prove his generational talent, solid defenders in Michel Salgado, Roberto Carlos, and a former FIFA Defender of the Year and club captain Fernando Hierro, a very solid defensive midfield line held by Claude Makelele, and was stacked with their attacking midfield options with Zidane, Figo, and to top it all off with legendary Spanish striker Raul. While they disappointingly had a string of losses towards the end of the season, which saw them finishing in third and losing the Copa del Rey final to Deportivo, Real Madrid were, however, looking very strong in the Champions League. They would defeat Bayern Munich in the quarterfinal and dominate rivals Barcelona in the semifinal, then go on to miraculously make a comeback win against the Michael Ballack-led Bayer Leverkusen in the Champions League final, with the iconic game-winning goal by no other than Madrid's newest Galactico, Zinedine Zidane. Madrid's Galactico program looked like a huge success. The club had finally gone back to winning major silverware. And in the opinion of their manager Vicente Del Bosque, the best way to continue to improve the squad was to spend money on defensive players in order to add more balance to the squad. So Florentino Perez would just completely ignore that, and instead looked for a superstar in the midfield and forward position. And so he would go on to spend what is today's equivalent of 70 million euros to sign the World Cup and Ballon d'Or winning superstar striker from Inter Milan, Ronaldo. Real Madrid's Galacticos were looking even scarier. They dominated and kept a comfortable lead on top of the La Liga table throughout the whole season, eventually winning the league title as well as the UEFA Super Cup and the Intercontinental Cup. And in the Champions League, everything was looking great, as Ronaldo scored his iconic hat-trick against Real Madrid in the quarterfinals. Then when it was time for the semi-final against Juventus...
What kind of mistake is that against Man United? This is very funny. What did he even write here?
Real Madrid...
What kind of mistake is this dude? Oh man, I mean it's different. I mean, like, kudos to him. These videos are hard to make. I have to tell you guys that. I have to get all these clips and actually have a good voice. I have a terrible voice. I would like to make videos like this, but a terrible voice, my terrible accent, is not going to work. But this guy is doing very, very well. This is just an honest mistake.
in the quarterfinals. Then when it was time for the semi-final against Juventus, Real Madrid had a comfortable 2-1 win at home in the first leg. But remember what Vicente Del Bosque said about needing more defensive players to balance out the squad? Well, in the second leg, Claude Makelele, who in the words of Zinedine Zidane himself, was the most important player on the squad for how he could defend the ball and keep possession as a defensive midfielder,
the worst move ever,
and couldn't play the match. Then what happened next was that Real Madrid would get trashed 3-1 to ultimately get knocked out of the tournament. Many believe that this squad was even more deadly than the one last season. But hey, overall the Galacticos were still looking like quite the success. Vicente Del Bosque, in just under 4 seasons with Real Madrid, managed to win them 2 La Liga titles, 1 Spanish Super Cup, 1 UEFA Super Cup, 1 Intercontinental Cup, and finally broke a nearly 40-year-long drought to bring the club 2 Champions League titles. Surely all they needed to do was just fix the small gaps in the squad to improve and hopefully continue on
Go
from
and sign
last season's
Beckham.
success. So with a strong squad and a great manager who the players respected, combined with a huge budget to continue to improve the club and win even more going forward, what do you think Papa Florentino Perez did? Well, that's easy. His solution was to simply sack Vicente Del Bosque and
he did
then
that.
spend what is today 54 million euros for David Beckham.
Perez
It
was
this
dumb
moment
that time,
it became
though.
clear to many how
Perez was just so dumb during that period. I'm not going to lie. Like, yeah, his initial plan was smart, but ultimately he was just a very, very dumb guy at that point. I don't know. Maybe he was just too rich. I really do not know. But this, like, if you think about this right now, this just makes no sense whatsoever. It makes no sense. It was so dumb. But after he came back, he has really been doing very, very well, except signing Hazard.
Perez was driven purely by commercial success. Because trust me, I love David Beckham and think he's the best overall crosser and set-piece taker of all time. But he was a terrible fit for Real Madrid. Not only did he play Luis Figo's position, but Madrid already had a surplus of midfielders like Guti. On top of that, Florentino Perez promised to give Makelele an extension and increased his contract, but would later tell him that they had no more money to pay him after blowing it all on David Beckham. Then to make matters worse, Real Madrid's general manager at the time, Jorge Valdano, disrespectfully told Makelele that he's supposed to play for Madrid for free. They would even let their captain and second most important defensive player, Fernando Hierro, leave the club after 14 years of service. So for the second year in a row, not only did they fail to improve the club's defense, they just straight up got rid of their best defensive players. Crazy. That's like if Real Madrid, in the middle of their Champions League three-peat, just decided to sack Zidane and get rid of Modric and Casemiro with absolutely nothing in return. And as you can guess, from here it all started to go downhill. The 2003-2004 season was a huge downgrade compared to the past few. In fact, this would be the last time for a couple of seasons that Real Madrid would win anything, and it was only a Spanish Super Cup. Hardly impressive at all compared to the huge hopes the fans had going for the club just at the end of last season. Beckham was brilliant and gave some of the most beautiful crosses the world has ever seen, but ultimately was just a redundant piece that Real Madrid did not need. This was also when Ronaldo would never start to be the same again, as since winning the World Cup in 2002 after coming back from massive injuries, his body would just start to decline at a rapid rate. He would also struggle with fitness issues and started putting on the most weight in his career so far. This would be the two worst years in the Galacticos era, as in the 2004-2005 season, as they would spend over 30 million euros on an English defender from Newcastle, named Jonathan Woodgate, who was only a decent defender for like 2 seasons max. And of course, the English tax on his price tag, as the market
English
lacked
tax.
any available world-class defenders since Real Madrid took way too long to start looking for one in the first place. They would also spend an additional 20 million euros for
On
the
another
hotshot
striker.
Ballon d'Or English
What
winning
the
striker,
hell?
Michael Owen. Ultimately, Owen would only stay a single season with Real Madrid, and Woodgate would only make a total of 15 appearances for the club. Real Madrid did not win a single piece of silverware this season. Then the 2005-2006 season was easily the worst. Final additions to the classic Galacticos was the 42 million euro signing of Sergio Ramos and the 40 million euro signing of Brazilian wonder kid Robinho. They would once again fail to win any piece of silverware this season. It was also the lowest goal-scoring season for Real Madrid in over a decade. In fact,
Ronaldinho.
after Vicente Del Bosque was unreasonably sacked, Real Madrid went through a total of 6 managers within 2 seasons. Just an absolute mess. And after the season, the classic Galacticos like Luis Figo, Zinedine Zidane, and Ronaldo had also departed from the club, as they had gotten much older and were well past their primes. Florentino Perez's original Galacticos campaign had come to an end, as he would lose the position of club president to Ramon Calderon after several seasons of Real Madrid underperforming despite their massive spending of big-name players. I would say that the only positive thing that came from this original Galacticos era was Florentino Perez's ability to remove the club's debt after selling the old Real Madrid training ground for a massive 686 million
That's
euros
crazy.
adjusted for inflation today, as the land was in prime central business district in Madrid, then buying their new training facility just outside the city for 154 million euros, turning over €500 million in profit for the club.
That is
Overall, it was a
crazy.
double-edged sword in terms
That
of
was good. That
finances
was good.
and sporting success. On one hand, Perez' strategy of bringing superstars generated significant revenue for the club through increased sales, sponsorship, and global exposure. This helped Real Madrid become one of the richest and most valuable clubs in the world.
Ultimately, Perez did a very good job in terms of putting Madrid back out there in terms of commercially. Madrid was in a very, very precarious situation, and they had to do something drastic, and it did something drastic, and it worked to an extent. But at some point, you have to think of the team itself. And to be fair to Perez, since he came back in 2009, it's very clear he learned his lesson, and he has actually really been so hell-bent on creating a very great midfield and better defense and all that. He has actually been doing all that, even neglecting the forward position at this point. I still insist that signing players that are close to 30 is not a good way. And that's just my own opinion about it. I think most of the time when you sign players of that age, they're almost done with their careers. They're trying to sign their last big contracts. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Let me know that in the comments. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.